Hey adventurers, today is a review for Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, specifically the translation by J.R.R. Tolkien. In this book that I have right here, there is also Pearl and Sir Orfeo. Unfortunately, I haven't read those yet, so I can't review them at the same time. So this is specifically a review for Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. So the author of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is unknown. We don't know who actually wrote this story, so we call him the Gawain poet or sometimes the Pearl poet. As I already mentioned, this edition is translated by J.R.R. Tolkien, and it, like all Arthurian legends, is a fantasy. It's a low fantasy. You can call it an Arthurian legend or a fairy tale fantasy. It kind of fits into a lot of different genres. There's not really a age range that you can specifically say this is for. Nowadays it would probably be classified in young adult or even adult fantasy, but it doesn't really fit into any one age category so much. Because this book is poetry, I can't really review it exactly like I would any other normal story, so while I am still kind of following my 5 elements outline, it will be a little bit different with more of a focus on what my overall thoughts were rather than breaking down each of those 5 elements that we've talked about. There's really kind of only 2 characters in this story that you follow, I guess, and that would be Sir Gawain and then the Green Knight, and it's really all following Sir Gawain, but the Green Knight is such a significant player that I can't really not include him in this characters portion. I don't really have a whole lot to say about the characters at this specific moment in the review, but basically what I found was that Gawain was super interesting to follow and that the Green Knight was threatening but interesting antagonist. The plot of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is, or at least what I wrote out for it, trying to come up with my own thing that is non-spoiler, but also gives a good taste of what this story is about, is that at a New Year's feast in Camelot, a giant green knight comes riding into the feasting hall and challenges the Knights of the Round Table to a contest. Gawain accepts the challenge, and after agreeing to find and meet the Green Knight in 1 year's time to receive the recompense, Gawain strikes off the head of the Green Knight. This begins the adventures of Gawain, who leaves Camelot in search of the Green Knight. This tale tells the account of Gawain's quest and explores the character of Gawain. There are a lot of themes in this story, specifically honesty, honor, integrity, chivalry, and many other themes that are common to Arthurian legends or medieval books, fiction books in general. So I don't really have a whole lot to say about the themes at this point either. The world / setting portion is that it is an already established world of King Arthur. We already know this world. You're going to this story expecting that the people who are reading it have heard about King Arthur stories, have learned about King Arthur stories for many, many years and know everything they need to know about them already. You really don't need a whole lot more setup than to know that it is the Feast of New Year's and that you're in King Arthur's court at the start of the beginning. The rest of it unfolds with the story. There's not really a whole lot going on in terms of flashy magical powers, stuff like that, but the things that are there, specifically the Green Knight, they fit very well within the lore of the Arthurian legends without they don't feel out of place, but they also feel new and interesting to other established stories within that world. So the general thoughts section, like I mentioned earlier, I think is where the bulk of this review will be. At least that's what I would hope, because this story it's not really written like a traditional story in that way, and so I can't really review it in that traditional way, or at least what is traditional to an erudite adventure. But I absolutely love this story. I believe that this is the first time I've completely read the story from the beginning to the end, all the way through. I may have in the past, or I may have read other versions, whether they are abridged versions or retellings of some sort in different Arthurian books. I don't know, but somehow I knew this story. I don't remember if I've ever completed this book or this translation. I know I've started it in the past, but I don't remember ever completing it. The thing about this story that really was just so cool to me, there's a lot of them, but just seeing Gawain's journey, his decisions, his failings, and his successes, the decisions that he makes along the way that lead to where he ends up at the end of the book, how they affect his character arc, how they affect his decision making. Even right at the very beginning when the Green Knight comes in, none of the Knights of the Round Table stand up and accept the challenge immediately. It takes some prodding from the Green Knight to get them to actually, until King Arthur actually stands up and is about to accept the challenge, but Gawain's like, no, I don't want you to do this, I will accept this challenge because basically you're the king and I can't let something happen to you. And so Gawain steps up and accepts that responsibility and accepts this challenge, and that kind of defines his character from there on, is that reluctance to accept the challenge, but the need and desire to protect and to follow the codes of chivalry that he has grown up believing in so much. But this story is ultimately about the character of Gawain. There's just so much about all of that, seeing his character arc, seeing his character growth in this story, because it's not a very long story, but he has a significant amount of character growth that some would consider insignificant, but if you actually think about it, he goes from one being or one person who believes and thinks one way to a different person who believes and thinks a different way. He's still Gawain, but he's a very different Gawain than he was at the beginning of the book. The way the story is set up, like I mentioned earlier, with it already being an established world, you don't need to set up the King Arthur, or Arthur is just a random person who has to draw the sword from the stone, who has to be crowned king. You don't have to go through all of that setup to tell this story. You already know, you're already in King Arthur's court. The only setup you need is this Green Knight coming and delivering this challenge. That's the inciting incident. Because it's such a short story, that's all you need to do in order to tell this story completely, and it works really well. The tropes that are used are not bad tropes. When I say bad tropes, that I am specifically talking about tropes that I dislike generally. Doesn't mean they're always done poorly, doesn't mean they're always done amazingly. Just ones that when I see them, I generally don't care for them. So that's what I mean when I say bad tropes. So the tropes in this story weren't bad. They were ones that I tend to really, really like. The quest trope, that's one of my favorite story arcs of all time, really. It's just, I tend to really enjoy a quest fantasy or a quest storyline of some sort, whatever that quest may be. So the fact that this story was a quest just made me enjoy it all the more. And then the atmosphere of the world, the way that this world is set up. When you read a King Arthur story, a well-written King Arthur story, you know that it's King Arthur. You don't have to know the names of the characters. You don't have to see Merlin. You don't have to see magic. All this stuff isn't important because the feeling of an Arthurian legend is there, and you're like, okay, this is an Arthurian legend, whether it specifically even references King Arthur or not. You can tell, you just know that it's Arthurian legend. And that same atmosphere was in this story. King Arthur was in it for a very, very short amount of time, maybe, I don't want to say like 5 pages of the book, and then he's gone. And you don't see Arthur again. You might see him once more, but you don't really see Arthur. And that's alright, you don't need to, because the story, just the atmosphere of the story gives you that feeling of, it's like a comfortable, relaxing atmosphere when you're going into a King Arthur story, and this story absolutely has that. The writing style, although it was translated by Tolkien, you can see the writing style coming through of the Gawain poet, but you can also see, and this is what I find really, really interesting, is you can also see Tolkien's writing style coming through as well. It's, for me, whose favorite author is Tolkien, who's read most of the stories by Tolkien. I've read quite a few of Tolkien's works, and so reading another book by Tolkien that is even just translated, I can see his writing style coming out, and that's really cool to me because Tolkien, like I mentioned, is my favorite author. The story itself it was obvious that the story was not his, but the writing style clearly was. The way this story is written and the fact that it is a poem is very interesting, especially when you factor in the fact that it doesn't rhyme for most of it. There is a little bit, about 4 lines at the end of each, I don't know, paragraph maybe you could call them, or something along those lines, that there is a small section in every once in a while that is written in poetry. It rhymes. I shouldn't say it is written in poetry because it's all written as poetry, but specifically some lines that do rhyme. So there is part of that, but most of it is not. Most of it, there's just a rhythm and a meter and a cadence that follow or that build this story and build this writing and make it very interesting to read. There's also the fact that the Gawain poet used alliteration extensively in his story to write this and to give a different tone, but also a more precise tone, I guess, to exactly what he is trying to portray with the words that he is writing. And Tolkien doesn't use perfect alliteration in the same way that I would assume the Gawain poet did, but there's still a large amount of that in there that you can see, and that's really cool to me, and I really loved reading this story. Just the way it flows, the flow of the story, you add in the alliteration and the cadence, and when you're speaking it out loud, it just flows out and it sounds so natural, but it's so cool to hear. And I just mentioned reading it aloud. Reading it aloud helps with comprehension so much. There were times when I would not read it out loud, whether I had read it out loud for a while and was just tired and needed a break from reading it out loud or something like that. I would read it in my head, and I understood it, but I couldn't comprehend it as much as I did before. So if you are reading this book and you're struggling with understanding it, I would suggest reading it aloud. It just, in general, it helps you to comprehend this story. I'm not really going to go through and break down every single aspect like I normally would with the rating, and I'm just gonna give it a blatant 5-star, a blanket 5-star, and say, yeah, this was amazing. You should absolutely read it if you want to and if you can. It's not difficult, and it's not long, but it takes some concentration and it takes some thought to be able to actually think through what's going on. You can't just read it and expect you to understand the story. It's not like it's confusing. It's just you need to actually put in some effort to get the story back out. And so that's going to turn some people off for sure from reading this story. But if you can be willing to put in the effort to actually read and comprehend this story, it's a very, very great story. So that is my review for Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, the edition translated by Tolkien himself. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe if you did. Thank you for watching an Erudite Adventure. We post videos every Monday and Thursday, and we have our social medias linked in the description down below. Thanks for watching. Stay warm.